For as long as video games have existed since mankind could stand on 2 feet, the FPS genre has had a long association with the medium. From its early software beginnings in Maze War, surge in popularity thanks to games like Wolfenstein, Doom, Marathon, Dorohedoro, multiplayer evolutions with Counter-Strike, Unreal Tournament, Battlefield, Halo, and every possible iteration that has existed within the past 20 years, it's safe to say that video games and first-person shooters are important to each other as Rebecca is to Atom Smasher. And a major IP that helped contribute to said genre, plus being 30 and older than today's college graduates, is Quake. A Lovecraftian, originally D&D inspired game where a Lone Ranger must battle some outworldly eldritch beings, Quake understood its FPS roots and brought it to greater heights. 3D engine utilization, which was extremely innovative at the time, fast frenetic in-your-face gameplay, multiplayer for those sweaty LAN parties, darker than my future environments that make my OLED monitor happy, and a soundscape produced by the largest nails ever made, Quake was a genre-defining video game. So much so that many single-player and multiplayer experiences can be attributed to Quake's influence. I must confess, although I've gotten the chance to play classic Doom, Wolfenstein, plus a myriad of boomer shooters that are literal love letters to Quake itself, I've never actually gotten the chance to play it. Quake 3 was my introduction to the series during my school days, and playing it in the computer lab with a bunch of friends while the teachers weren't looking was a core memory that I could never forget. I touched 4 for a bit, played some enemy territory, and attempted to have fun in Champions. Fun being the ideal word. So, finally finding a reason to get off my lazy ass and play it, does the first Quake hold up? A Lone Ranger must battle the forces of Shub and stop the Earth from going insane. There's 5 paragraphs of story dialogue that you have to hear, and that's it. It's just there so the game can exist, nothing more. Next. So to start off, I tried my best to play Quake in the most traditional way possible, and the closest thing I settled on was playing the OG version of the Night Dive remaster. I would have loved to play the original MS-DOS version, and I honestly could do it thanks to some of the tutorials online, but this version was the most convenient for me. Further research suggests that the Windows version I'm playing is mechanically the same as the DOS version, and I'm okay with that. Alright, that said, the gameplay of Quake is as traditional boomer shooter as it gets. In fact, if my memory is serving me correctly, this is the original 3D boomer shooter. Just like Wolfenstein and Doom before it, id Software utilizes what makes those games fun as first-person shooters and dials it up with the 3D space. The Ranger goes through different sections of the game, which in turn contains various levels that the player has to navigate. In trying to finish each level, you'll be shooting a variety of monsters, ranging from mostly fleshy, naked ones to sword-wielding knights who have the durability like the ones in Monty Python.
How about you?
And just like Doom, you'll also have to fetch some keys to unlock doors in order to progress. So to put it bluntly, the Doom design, but now with verticality and 3D rendered space. And for being as old and designed as it was then, it still slaps. I mean, of course there's nothing really complicated about it, and you're just going through a level blasting a bunch of monsters to death, but it's the way Quake manages to maintain its pacing and space that makes it hold up a lot better than I thought. For me, the first thing I took notice of was speed. Now, unlike the average computer back in the late 90s that might have exploded at the thought of running Crysis, my modern-day food stamps computer is capable of achieving that oddly numbered 72 max frame rate of the original Quake. And because of that, it made for a very fluid shooting experience, coupled with the Ranger's degree of movement, which includes the famous strafe jumping technique that I still need to practice, and weapon swapping for the appropriate gun. The core pacing was fast, fluid, and fun as heck. The second thing I noticed was the 3D space. The level design is relatively corridor-esque, where the fights can get pretty close, and you have to think about whether using your grenade or rocket launcher won't blow you up as well. Very arena-like, but fights in tight spaces. Obviously, the then revolutionary concepts like being able to utilize your mouse to aim, vertical design, and just the general three-dimensional environments is a norm for today's standards. But even with it being the first incarnation of an FPS 3D game, it's what also keeps it from feeling dated. Maybe this is just me speaking on the current era of FPS games and how they've never really pushed beyond the limits of a 3D environment, not that it needs to, unless our fourth-dimensional third eye opens up, but it's safe to say that Quake's established norms that have influenced today's FPS games have also allowed it to stand well even now. Another thing that made the 3D environment feel retrospectively impressive were the weapons, specifically the grenade launcher. I was enjoying it as usual, shooting with reckless abandon and making me feel like a certain black Scottish Cyclops in Team Fortress 2.
They got more
But being able to shoot grenades from various distances, going through windows, and around the corner made me realize its innovation. When you shoot it, you can actually see how it reacts to the 3D environment, bouncing around the room, hitting the floor, even sliding under openings that you yourself can't reach. That sense of space utilization and tangibility is what makes it so revolutionary. It feels like there's a sense of real-world physics at work. It's also just fun to use as its own mechanic, and trying to use it effectively to shoot monsters from around the corner. Also really cool is how the grenade and rocket launcher are the only weapons that can put down the zombies for good. Other things of note were the enemy types that I had to deal with, mostly a lot of them just wanting to give me a smooch and tear my head off, weapon utilization to stop said enemies from smooching and tearing my head off, as well as the classic hidden secrets that you can find throughout the map. Too bad I'm kind of blind. Of course, maybe these core designs might not matter to some of you, and gameplay feel alone just won't cut it. Again, it is a simple shooter, where you're just blasting enemies from one room to another, and there are a significant number of modern titles that iterate upon Quake. But sometimes, simple is best. Fun for what it is without trying to be anything else. A 30-year-old game that still manages to feel fast and visceral, Quake still plays great. I'm sure it goes without saying, but Quake is definitely old as hell, and everything from the engine, the assets, the textures, and even the overlay is an obvious indication of its 90s shooter heritage. Heck, even the slower frame animation of the enemies is an obvious tell. But on the one hand, my special retro eyes scream with joy at how awesomely dark, brown, and dirty this game looks. Personally, I think the monster design still looks rad. Although the details are a bit flat, and the armor of two of the enemies look like their skin rather than some outer layer clothing, but the older polygonal design gives them a terrifying look. It kinda reminded me a bit of Silent Hill 1, where the older assets of the monsters have their own sense of visual horror that can be more distinct than something that goes for pure realism. Also, the game is dark as heck. Maybe it's the Windows version of Quake, and I did get through the game just fine without ever changing the brightness, but a part of me still wishes I had upped the gamma for certain levels. Still old as heck visuals, but I love it, and especially when you consider the technical achievements Quake invented for the 3D space back in the day, retrospectively, it's awesome to see. Now for the sound front, it's pretty dang good. Again, very much on the older side in terms of technical design when hearing it through modern machines, but for what was done back in the day, it's a great unsettling compliment to Quake's visual design. With effects and music composed by the one and only 9 Inch Nails, alongside the wonderfully metal, technical, explosive, almost sci-fi sounds that is played for the weapons, pickups, and UI interactions. The sound effects used for the monsters are very dark, unsettling, and creepy. It's It's not overtly scary that it becomes a horror game, but a sound profile that makes it eerie and easy to identify that these guys are the monsters that you need to shoot. And just like the unsettling atmosphere, the music is the best complement. For a band that is heavy on industrial rock, metal, and alternative to name a few genres that typically describe them, a lot of what defines the music of Nine Inch Nails also defines the unsettling, industrial, almost metal-like feel of Quake. So well implemented and loved that the devs decided to make an homage to Nine Inch Nails by putting their logo on the nail gun ammo box. Oh! The only real gripe is that the soundtrack doesn't play by default. I believe it's due to something regarding the game's original programming, in that it needed to play the tracks directly off the CD. But since the last disc-based system I ever used is somewhere in the city of Rhea, my easiest solution was just to have the soundtrack on shuffle in the background. Old, dirty, brown, and dark, Quake's overall presentation may be outdated by today's modern standards, but it's got that 90s polygonal charm and industrial heavy sound that makes it hold up from my retro-laden eyes. It's pretty good. Again, it's just a simple classic style shooter where you gotta blast your way to the end of the game, but it's crazy how something as simple as control and feel can still give Quake its legs to stand today. Fast-paced and in-your-face, 30 years doesn't make it feel old at all. Maybe this speaks volumes about how Quake's influence helped bring about an era for 3D FPS games that can still be felt today, or maybe the state of today's FPS games currently limited by a 3D environment, again until one day we open up our third bunghole, but at the end of the day, Quake is still just great, and I'm glad to experience what made its refinement of the FPS groundwork that its predecessors had laid to help lay the foundations that all modern FPS titles still stand on. So for me, it holds up amazingly well. Now, I can't wait to try the mods. But that's gonna do it for today, guys. Thanks for sticking around. There will be more games to play and more videos coming soon, so please stay tuned if you'd like to see more. But for now, I'll see you all next time.